Okay, here we are.
Another month.
October 2020. It's amazing.
October 2020. It feels like it could be March with the pandemic, but it's actually October.
We were prescient. We started these haiku meetings online to start with. Actually, that's not true. We started in coffee shops, and then we kind of evolved to this, not because of the pandemic. This is pre-pandemic, just because Davin's out of town. Yeah, well, mostly because it was hard to do it with the noise, with not all of us in that co-located position. And so I think this has worked out really well, I think.
But our first session was all face-to-face, right? I was in Boise, and we were all together, right?
Our very first one.
Yeah.
Very first one. Yeah.
First and only.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, maybe someday, it's like a Diana Ross song, someday we'll be together. You know?
And that was August 2019, right? When we were all in Boise, I think.
I think so.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Sounds about right.
And it was Kelly, our friend Kelly, there with us at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
It was.
Good. So let's see. So who wants to start? Who wants to be the first? Or who wants to be the first?
I think we should do Davin's first.
I thought so too. And in fact, when I was trying to put the photos up for us to show this morning, I had his first. So his first. So this is what it looks like to all those out in Never Land. Or Everland. Okay, let's do it.
All right, the title is The Conspiracy of the Poor. Be poor in spirit. Give only to give, not more. Seeds of perfection.
You want
me to read mine? Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I feel like my thoughts are a little scattered on this, but we'll just go with it. I wonder if these 17 syllables are a masterclass in becoming human, an alternative orthodoxy to common beliefs. Be. This haiku starts out with a command, be. We aren't being invited to do something, strive or work hard. The invitation is to be, and in the full embodiment of the being, something might unfold. Poor is defined as lack of sufficiency, as lacking sufficiency. The definition helps bring meaning. There is something powerful that happens when we realize in grace that we don't have all that it takes, and that's okay. When we are poor in spirit, it leaves room for help, for growth, for grace. Give only to give, not more. The words in this line are so simple, and yet it's the hardest thing. To give only to give is not easy. I think the invitation is to not let our lack of sufficiency be a barrier, rather a way to see our lack as someone else's gain, or their lack as the gain we might need. No one has all that it takes. So when we give, we are engaging in an exchange that benefits everyone. At first, the final line, seeds of perfection, stumped me. How does perfection fit with being poor in spirit and giving? Perfection is defined, back to the dictionary, as the condition or state or quality of being free, or as free as possible from all flaws or defects. Maybe the fact that I was confused shows how well society has convinced me that perfection is not having, doing, being it all without fault. Maybe perfection is less about the doing and more about the being. Maybe when we realize the gap between what we desire and what we have, maybe when we give from where we lack sufficiency, that humility, that brings us closer to perfection than we all have been taught. Is the emptiness, humility, lacking of sufficiency, and the space that opens up where we find freedom. The seeds of perfection are planted when we accept with open hands and heart the gap between what we desire and where we are.
Wow, boy, I don't think you're scattered at all. Holy cow, you dissected that amazingly. Wow.
Oh, well, I didn't look at it, even though you sent it a week in advance. It wasn't until yesterday that I started looking at it. And honestly, it was this morning, I was still like taking it apart. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Wow, thank you.
You know, it just goes to prove that this process that we're involved in, the writing, the sharing, the writing, the sending, the reading, the writing, and the sharing are all learning processes. Because this one was the same for me. I've had the challenge of thinking about the poor in spirit for quite a while. So let me read, I'll read what I've got right now, but these are learning opportunities for us, which is really cool. It's not just like we're talking and laying them out there. It's like learning. And, we'll continue to learn too as we go through. So this is, when I read this haiku with the accompanying picture, with hands reaching out to each other, I immediately thought of a profound little book by Johannes Baptist Metz called The Poverty of Spirit. This is it right here. I've given this book away to other people. I have often struggled with what it means to be poor in spirit, and Metz helped me to get my arms around this, the subject of the first beatitude. To become human means to become poor, he says, to have nothing that one might brag about before God, he says, page 10. This is totally counter to the consumption, goal-oriented, success quest culture of vanity which surrounds us. So in what way then is being poor in spirit a conspiracy? And of the poor? How are the poor conspiring? In what way is poverty a seed of perfection? This is all going back to the title, Conspiracy of the Poor. I must admit that this thinking seems all upside down to me. It raises more questions. And it's only when I hear Metz say, the unending nature of our poverty as human beings is our only innate treasure, that I can start to understand that poor in spirit doesn't mean to have a lack of spirit, but rather it means to have a spirit of poverty. This poverty of spirit is not, he says, just one virtue among many. And this is interesting. It is the hidden component of every transcending act, the ground of every theological virtue. Finally, the idea of giving to give without any expectation grounds this conspiracy in true generosity rather than a transactional this for that. May these seeds of perfection blossom.
Wow, I love it.
Nice work, Dr.
You guys have done
Cartel.
better with this than I have. That's awesome. So I would love, so I don't know that book, but it would be an excellent companion piece to the Tugwell book that inspired this haiku. So I'd love to see that. So say again what book that is?
It will be winging your way, so don't worry about it. It will be winging your way via the whatevers. It's Poverty of Spirit by Johann Baptist Metz. He's written some other books about interior freedom. Anyway, he's well, I can't tell you all about him right now, but he's
Is
awesome.
he contemporary author or is he
Nope.
older?
Translated by John Drury, Hollis Press, copyright 1968.
All the good things are old things.
We just had that conversation last night, didn't we, Davin? A related conversation to that last night.
So our research apprenticeship students last night, we were talking about how, something that was written 20 or 40 or 80 or 3,000 years ago, doesn't expire. Great writing is great writing.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
Even if it's got these and thous and, all these other, this language or style or things that we don't really relate to as much, that doesn't mean the thoughts aren't powerful. So, and timeless. So anyway.
All right. Simon Tugwell is a contemporary Dominican friar, a member of the Order of Preachers, founded by Saint Dominic in the 13th century. His phrase, conspiracy of the poor, sounds off-putting at first, even in the full context of his book, Prayer, Living with God. Conspiracies are bad in any context, right? And it rings an objectifying tone to point the finger directly at the poor. Tugwell reminds us, though, of our hubris. We always think the poor refers to someone else, never us. Aquinas, as in saint, also a Dominican, wrote about two kinds of poverty: material poverty and poverty of the heart in service of the truth. The former is descriptive, so material poverty is descriptive. The latter is prescriptive, poverty of the heart in service of the truth. Do this. The conspiracy of the poor is not nefarious. It's not Watergate. It's not even organized. Instead, it's the collective force of individuals living without guile or ulterior motives. Give only to give, not more. It's an effacing alternative to the arrogance and condescension of much charity, and just happens to align well with a certain sermon preached from a hill they called a mount. I'll confess to being a failure in this regard, being poor in spirit. It's hard. If it were easy, everyone would do it, and then there'd be no more conspiracy.
Mm.
Wow.
That little haiku, we could talk about that for hours, especially these writings.
Just the idea of the conspiracy of the poor. I've honest to God, I've dwelled on that phrase for years, and it still is a bit of a mystery. So I'm just kind of unraveling it bit by bit.
So now, is that a book we all should get? We should all consider getting? Does it have big words? If it's got big words, I don't want it. I need little words, one syllable words.
So Tugwell is contemporary. I mean, he's still around and still writing. And I think that it's pretty good stuff.
Check it out.
Yeah, I tend to find that I don't find books on my own by going through and looking. I find books because here's a reference to a book, or here's another reference to a book, and so now one of our students calls it going down rabbit holes. Amy, it's all of a sudden here's this thing, and now I'm going down here. Now I've got five books, but I got 5 books by blank. I've got whatever. So anyway, it's a fun process.
I just have to say too, just in way pop culture reference, there's a Friends episode where Phoebe's trying to give without feeling good about it, because she's like, it's, and I kept thinking about that, like this whole episode of, she's like, anything I do, I feel good about it. And then does it count? And I thought about like working in a Friends reference, but
I love it. I love it. It's like the Tao of poo, but the sacrament of
Friends, right?
All wisdom can be found through Pooh, Phoebe, and Seinfeld. Those are kind of the
That's true.
We're dating ourselves, I think.
Or Michael Scott from The Office, but
yes, he's another one of those icon class.
Yeah.
Okay.
An unwitting prophet, Michael Scott.
Yes.
Yeah.
So funny.
So, Amy, you want to go? You want me to?
I think you should.
Okay, I'll go. So this is the haiku. Now, I'm going to tee this up just a little bit. So here's the haiku. But as you know, I send these haikus out to people, and a lot of times anonymously. And so this is my first haiku where I've really felt like I had kind of a social justice or an action piece to it. So most of the time I like to send out haiku drops that can be generative or supportive or those kind of things, but I've had this climate change on my mind lately. So a companion piece to this is I also sent out this little long haiku talking about the endless sky and the beauty of nature and those kind of things, just as a counterpoint to say I'm not all that, I'm not totally depressed. So that's kind of the background.
I mean, this is pretty remarkable, actually. So you've got this sort of happy cloud, which I think was the first thing that I saw when I opened it, and then this is remarkable, right? So this series of haiku, you're prolific and gifted. So, and then I came to this one and I'm like, oh my God. So, I mean, oh my God. And like, well, that's that's sad, right? So you go from the happy cloud, Bob Ross, happy trees and happy clouds, to the haiku that is like the, you know, dagger in the heart, and then Woody Guthrie in the back here. You know, this is totally a Woody Guthrie song, written by Michael Crow. So this is your mailing was a work of art.
It really was. It really was.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I have so much fun. I do these every day. So I've got 2 that I'm sending out today. So this is just the period on this little teeing it up. So I saw what you had on your what you had, I had written in hand, Davin.
Yeah.
So as the month goes on, as I send these out every day, this kind of evolves. So on the back of these letters, I now have a picture, you know, and it says, "Earth laughs in flowers." And then, "When the well's dry, we know the worth of water." And then I've got a picture with a well and all these sort of things. So as it's so generative for me because, and I've got some quotes on the inside of the flap now too. And so it's just an interesting, you know, for me, it's just, I love this process. I love it. I'm so grateful that you all are doing this with me. So now I'll read. So here's the haiku, and the title of it, which is, might be hard to read. A lot of folks might miss it, but it's called Climate Change. Smoky horizon, the smell and taste of burnt ash, touched, we hear your cries.
All right, I'll go. So I too, when I wrote down this little thing that I love to send out haikus, but it's always so much fun to open your haiku. And it was such a gift this month with all of the different things to read and consider. So that was fun. And I when I was thinking about it, I really felt just like you said, that it was an invitation to notice and to action. And I felt like this envelope this month was a call from complacency to hope. So that's just my little beginning. So this is my response. We had so many days of dark, thick smoke, ash thickly covering everything. It's hard not to feel despair when the world is literally burning. I like how this haiku invites us not to just see, feel, and taste, the senses that we easily revert to, but also invites us to hear the trees, birds, animals, homes, people, rocks in the smoke. In those smoky days, it was easy to focus on the air quality and forget that the smoke is more than just air quality. It's the result of something combusting. It's the release of materials and gases. Something has been destroyed. Scriptures say that rocks and trees will cry out. This haiku reminds us that indeed they have been crying out. The practice of a haiku, or putting a frame around a moment, has the magical power to make every moment sacred. Even the smokiest moments remind us that we are all connected, that it's not just our eyes that hurt, but maybe our hearts as well.
Gosh, I love that, Amy. I love that.
Yeah. Even the rocks will cry out.
That's right. That's amazing.
All right. So important for mine is that you can't see the climate change, right? It's there, it's dark. So
yeah.
The darkness of the image foreshadows the rest. The haiku combined with the song lyrics form an apocalyptic vision, very uncrothian, to be honest, but also very prophetic. Having lived in the east of the United States and the West, there is not much that compares to the blanket of smoke shrouding the Western mountains when the fires are raging. The dense midnight Appalachian fog that sometimes settles on Pennsylvania and West Virginia hills can hide turns in the road, but still contains a natural beauty all its own. There is nothing beautiful about smoke in the West. The acridity burns enough that one hardly notices the hidden, once glorious horizon. Like all natural disasters, it preys most ferociously on those least able to afford it, adding insult to the injury of a dysfunctional social safety net. Cries indeed. In the midst of the mourning, or perhaps because of it, It's time to get to work.
Mm.
So a call for action.
Nice.
I love just listening to yours. You know, I'm a West Coast girl. I've always been in the West. And so I love your comparing and contrasting because it caused me to see, you know, something that I haven't necessarily seen because I've always experienced those smoky days. So
You have an interesting contrast, even more than just that simple one. You grew up in or you spent time in Pennsylvania, which is like coal country, I think, right?
mm,
Yep.
So industrial East Coast versus the West is, you know, I've been to the East Coast and I've been to those places, but like you, Amy, I haven't lived there. I've lived in Kansas for a little while, but I mean, for my first part of my life, but then it was all Albuquerque in the West, Albuquerque and Boise. So very
Yeah,
different experiences.
they talk about Pennsylvania as having been recycled twice over. So it started out with, you know, a very forested landscape and all the trees were laid bare and they've all grown back. So recycled now once over, and then the coal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the coal extracted and then recycled once again.
Interesting.
Used up again and again.
So it's interesting. This is a big issue to me. To me, it's the existential issue of our times. And I wrote this and I send these haikus out to various folks. So I sent it to one, I sent it to was a conservation organization. And I was feeling, you know, gosh. So I actually made a contribution to this organization, which I hadn't before. I said, gosh, I got to be careful about what I write about. I'm not going to have any money. It's going to go out to all these people. So, okay, haiku, Smoky Horizon. The haiku and the picture behind it were written when Boise was inundated with smoke from the fires from the West Coast. High above Boise, we could see the smoky sky stretch on forever. In tennis, when a player makes a mistake through lack of attention or just poor play, not caused by being pressed by the opposing player, it's called an unforced error. It's a mistake, self-inflicted, just like global warming and human-caused climate change. And that's a tragedy of it. If a meteor comes and destroys our planet, that's pretty much out of our hands. But if we destroy our own natural world as we know it, that's an unforced error. Mm. I don't know much about Lamentations or biblical prophets, but here we are. The fleeing animals cry out. The vanishing species cry out. The burnt homes, places where people have stored their wealth, security, and memories, cry out. The scientists are telling us what will happen, but we listen not. In these ashes are the taste of defeat. In this smoke is the vision of an overcast future. In these cries, we hear torment. In these fires, the smell of defeat. In these embers, the feel of failure. Of all the worries I have about this or that, this is the one that is most devastating. Nations will rise and fall. Economies will evolve. People will unnecessarily die from viruses or neglect, and others will sit on toilets made of gold. Even with these, there is hope for humanity. If the unforced error of global warming isn't followed up, and quickly, with a series of aces, this game is over for us.
Wow.
So there's that.
You tried to bring in a little bit of hopefulness there in the middle, but you crushed it at the end.
Well, I want to see Federer, you know, my favorite player right now, hit some aces. I want to see him hit some backhands down the line, and you know, we need some folks taking leadership.
Yeah, and you know, the concept and term unforced error is really underutilized. It's a brilliant idea.
Yeah, that was what stood out to me too. I love that idea, unforced error.
I have a little essay about it in Profound Living because the where that phrase came from in tennis and why, because I think it is really powerful. You know, some things we just don't have control over, and some we try pretty hard, but some are just unforced. You know, I can't believe I made that mistake.
Yeah,
you see it all the time in this and that. Anyway, so that was a lot of I say fun, but it was important to write those kind of things.
Yeah, thank you.
For sure.
I
All right,
think we
Amy.
have one more.
All right. So this was mine this month.
Yes.
Plus the addition of the addition of the climb a tree today.
Oh, everyone got different little things. All right. So it's in the sacred pause, all the doing settles down. Peace comes in the pause.
All right, I will start. Consecrate the pause. The arrival of peace is sacramental. In Pennsylvania, where I've spent most of my life to this point, torrential summer rains are common, and they can surprise you too. Driving quickly becomes dangerous as your car and windshield are pelted by water balloon raindrops.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a landscape peppered with bridges, as the ancient Rust Belt road system scratched in one byway after another to reach yet another coal mine or bar, but always needing to go under the railroad tracks. There's a remarkable pause that occurs under those bridges in the midst of a summer storm. The anxiety of the blinding rain, the pounding of the drops on the car metal, the rush of water into the wheel wells, they all stop. It's only a moment, but it's a glorious moment, a sacred moment, or at least a moment to remind you that such moments are sacred. The idea of a sacred pause brings so many things to mind, actually. I remember hitting baseballs would sometimes make the world stop for what seemed like an eternity. There was nothing but me and the ball. Everything else faded away in peaceful joyfulness. Conversations with dear friends when an hour seems like 2 minutes. That's a sacred pause. Mm. Singing an old favorite song that you haven't heard for a while. Forgetting everything else that you were doing beforehand. That's a sacred pause. Really, they're everywhere. Maybe I just need to recognize them more.
That is good writing. That's
so good
writing. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
My dad always makes the joke when we're riding in a car together in the middle of a rainstorm and we're coming up on a bridge. He was like, "Don't worry about it, it'll stop." We're going to the bridge and then it'll stop.
Dad. Wow. Oh, I love this, and part of the reason I love it, this haiku, is because this idea of pausing is something I've been thinking a lot about. And it started, I don't know when it started, but it came close to me when we actually, the beginning of our little haiku practice came from this book, The Art of Pausing. Mm-hmm. And so since then, I've also read other books about pausing, 7 Sacred Pauses, which are what the monks do during the day, in various ways, because in this attention economy, everything's trying to get us to keep going, keep going, keep going. So this pause, this whole idea of pause is powerful. So what is a sacred pause? Is that different than any other pause? I had to pause to ponder pauses predictably. Words come from our mouths and our pens and in our thoughts easily, but just as in this busy, whizzy, world in a tizzy, kibitzy world we inhabit, words fly by unquestioned, symbolic of our unconsidered lives. Let's see if I can get those words out. So, a sacred pause. Is that more or less than just stopping? Perhaps even stopping and, as this haiku lays out, settling down. Yes, settling down into the peace of the pause. Is that settling down, that peace, sacred? Or must a sacred pause involve more or less than just not doing? Perhaps in the pause, in the settling down, in the peace, we can sense the sacredness that's always there, always around and within us, even in the hustle, bustle, tussle of the day. Perhaps the pause just allows us to experience what is already there. Perhaps. But this haiku reminds us that the sacred is the ground around, is the main course, and the rest is just the parsley.
The parsley.
The parsley.
That's so funny. All right, this is
Well,
my
All right. Yeah. Let's hear yours.
okay. My son is a golfer. This summer, after a very busy few months of golf, just 1 week before the biggest tournament of the year, he got a summer cold. But in a pandemic, even a simple cold wasn't so simple. What was supposed to be a week of practice and getting ready for the big tournament was suddenly assuming it was COVID at the advice of a doctor until proven otherwise. It all came to a halt as we waited for the results. When you're 12 and love something as much as he does and work as hard as he does, it was an unwelcome pause in the pace that he keeps and loves. We talked about that if you have a bottle of water and sand, when the bottle is moving, the sand and water are swirling and mixed together. But when you let the bottle sit for a few minutes, the water and sand settle out. I assured him that the unwanted pause in his pace wasn't going to hurt him. I assured him with confidence and fingers crossed that he would probably even do better because of this pause. He had 1 day to practice before we left for the tournament. The first round of golf he played after that week off was his best round of golf ever. Under par score, 4 under par with 2 eagles. It was a practice round and not a tournament round, but the lesson was even more valuable than the tournament itself. So this story was the inspiration for this haiku. I hoped what I was confidently telling my son about letting the sand settle was true, and it was. Pauses are sacred moments where we catch our breath and see with new eyes. Just like a bottle of water and sand, as long as we are moving, the sand will stay swirling and churning. We can't see how much sand there is, what color the sand is, or the size of the sand when the bottle is in motion. Just a few minutes of pause lets the sand settle, and the questions that once seemed too difficult to answer suddenly come into focus. Someone once told me it's not the length of the pause that matters, it's the quality of the pause. All of these ideas and experiences were what I was trying to fit into these 17 syllables.
What a great story that is. That is a great story. I can just feel, he's 12?
Yes,
I
yeah.
can just feel, when you're 12, I got to get out of there. Gotta.
Mhm.
Well, great advice. And even better that it panned out.
Yeah, that was a lucky little. But I mean, and we were talking about it yesterday, and he was telling me like, you were right. Like it helped. The stopping helped me to, that it was a life lesson.
Yeah.
That will stay with him. So
I'll remember that forever.
Mhm.
Sure.
Mhm.
Excellent. Well, I mean, it is a really great thing to think about. There are lots of pauses, but what are the ones that are sacred?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, colleagues, friends, anything else we need to talk about before we get out of here?
Just thank you. It's always such a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you all.
I feel very fortunate. Thanks, everyone.
Be well. Stay healthy.
May the haiku be with you.